Out 4. This little boy receives 6 golden eggs every day. Each golden egg weighs several pounds. It turns out that the golden eggs were given to him by a giant from heaven. The boy's name is Roy. Just a few days ago he was playing in the woods when he came across a giant. The giant then lifted him up. Roy was so scared that his trousers were wet. Just when he thought the giant was going to eat him, the giant told him his home was in the sky. If he could help him get home, then he would give him 6 golden eggs every day. Roy heard the giant say that each one weighed several pounds. Without thinking, he agreed. As the night wore on, the giant's stomach rumbled with hunger. Roy took the giant to the kitchen of the village. Then Roy picked up a huge radish and offered it to the giant. But before the giant had a chance to eat it, the village's giant hunters followed the giant's scent and found the place. Roy had a brainwave. He grabbed a tablecloth and covered the giant with it. When the hunter came in, he questioned Roy. Why did the kitchen smell like a giant? But Roy told the hunter it was because he hadn't washed his feet in 3 years. The smell was his own feet, and so he managed to fool the hunter. To keep the giant safe, Roy took the giant into the woods and hid him. In the woods, the giant gave Roy a telescope. He told Roy that his home was in the sky. Roy picked up the telescope and looked up into the sky, and sure enough, he saw the giant's home, and so Roy believed the giant's words. In order to get the golden egg, Roy decided to find a way to help the giant get home right away. The next day Roy sneaked out of his house and took the money to the fair. Then he found a wizard. He wanted to find a way to fly into the sky from the wizard. The wizard was impatient and tried to kick him out. But when Roy took out his gold coins, the money-minded wizard took out a loaf of bread and told Roy that this bread would take him to the sky. Roy didn't even think about it and bought the bread. On the other hand, the hunter gathered all the people of the village together, for she knew from the footprints on the ground the giants had come to the village. The woman snapped up the mud and put it in her mouth and tasted it. Then she learned that the giant had come to the village. The villagers were terrified at the news, for the giants were said to be very vicious and to eat people. On the other hand, the giant who had just woken up heard that the town was very busy, so he sneaked into the town to check it out. But he didn't expect to run into the villagers who came to arrest him. Luckily, Roy arrived just in time. Then Roy took the giant and ran away. But then there was an accident. The giant accidentally hit a road sign on the side of the road. He then passed out. Just then, the villagers came after him. The villagers saw the fainted giant on the ground. The villagers swarmed and grabbed him. When the giant woke up again, he found himself tied up. The villagers voted to burn the giant to death. On the other hand, Roy sneaks up behind the giant with his axe when they are not looking. But before he could do anything, the hunter found him. The hunter thinks that Roy is an accomplice of the giant, so he proposed that Roy's family be burned to death. And so Roy's family and the giant were tied up. Immediately the hunter set fire to the wood. Then the villagers gathered around the fire and began to celebrate. Just then the giant burst into tears. I didn't know that even a big and powerful giant could cry like a child. Those 2 eyes were like 2 huge faucets. They were spraying like mad at the fire. Roy saw this and continued to talk to the giant. Stimulated, the giant cried even harder. The tears easily extinguished the fire. Roy also took the opportunity to break free from the ropes. He then cut the rope with his axe to save the giant and his mother. On the other side, the villagers were all about celebrating. No one even noticed them. By the time the villagers reacted, they had already escaped. Soon the 3 fled to the woods. Then Roy took out the magic bread, ready to help the giant get back to the sky. Little boy planted a loaf of bread in the ground. The next second, a bread tree broke through the ground. It was like Roy was on a rocket. He was taken 10,000 meters into the air. The villagers who arrived were stunned at the sight. Up there Roy was terrified. The giant saw that Roy was in danger. Immediately, he climbed up the bread tree to rescue Roy. But to his surprise, the vicious hunter took out his axe. He slashed at the bread tree. As the bread tree shook violently, Roy fell from the top of the tree. The giant immediately reached out to catch him, and so they both fell. Roy fell right into the belly of the giant, and then he bounced up again. And so Roy played with the giant's belly as if it were a trampoline. The villagers were amused by the scene. They didn't think that the legendary and ferocious giant could be so sweet and kind. Just then the bread tree suddenly fell down. The tree suddenly fell on the king's hunter. The villagers rushed to the rescue, but the bread tree was too heavy. They couldn't lift it. Just then the giant came up to them. He pushed the tree away and rescued the hunter. And so the giant was completely accepted by the villagers. Roy then borrowed another piece of bread from the villagers and buried it again in the earth. Soon another bread tree came out of the ground. Looking at the giant who was about to leave, Roy was very sad and cried like a baby. As he left, the giant gave Roy a golden egg. At last, with the villagers giving him a warm welcome, the giant slowly climbed up the bread tree. He returned to his own world. After that, the villagers received a golden egg every day, and the kind-hearted Roy received 6 every day. And so Roy and his family lived a life free of food and clothing.